Nique Clifford is a Sacramento King, and I am very excited about that. The Kings coming into the night of the first round of the NBA draft, not having a first round pick. And so it was kind of nerve wracking because I really wanted the Kings to be able to trade into this draft. And, all signs were pointing towards the Kings getting into this draft in somewhere in the early 20s is what all the reporting was. But then, of course, as the night goes along, and we hear about how the Kings want a point guard, which I mean didn't even totally make sense to me. Like, yes, I mean it makes sense they want a point guard, but it felt like all the reporting was like they're just looking at guards and like Walter Clayton Jr. And so when he went off the board, when Nolan Traore went off the board, and when Kasparis Yakachonis went off the board, all in succession, right? 18, 19, 20, especially Yakachonis to the Heat there, I got very nervous. And then it's like 21 went by, 22 went by, 23 went by, and I'm just thinking like that was the early 20s, right? So I was thinking that it wasn't gonna happen. But then you get to that 24th pick with OKC, and OKC has everyone under contract next season, like literally everyone, and they already made a pick earlier in the first round. And so it's like, why do they need that 24th pick? They don't. And the Kings were able to trade with OKC. They were able to trade for that 24th pick, sending out the Spurs 2027 first round pick that's protected top 16. By 2027, I'm sure the Spurs will be a solid team, so it will probably convey somewhere in the 20s. But if it doesn't convey, and that Spurs pick is in the top 16, then it will turn into two second round picks. And so that's not an insane amount to give up for the 24th pick in this draft if you have a guy that you really like. And Nique Clifford obviously is that guy for Scott Perry and this front office. He's that guy that they like. And so pretty much you're giving up a pick that could be around 24 in 2027 for the 24th pick right here, getting Nique Clifford. And Nique Clifford's a guy who I really liked coming into this because I mean, he's a wing, first of all. He's not necessarily like the jumbo wing that the Kings really need, but we'll take any athletic long wings, 6'6", solid length. He doesn't have like a crazy wingspan or anything, but solid length. And so someone that you can pair with Keegan Murray out there, Jake LaRavia, we don't know if we're going to be able to retain him or not. Hopefully we still do, even with bringing in Nique Clifford. It's not like we don't need Jake LaRavia now, but in case LaRavia does leave because the Kings are limited in what they can offer him, now we have Nique Clifford as that backup. And so he's 23 years old, obviously an old rookie. So Scott Perry just taking a book out of, Monty McNair's playbook with that one, which is a little funny that, we're still drafting the older guys, but I'm fine with it. You're not drafting at 24 for someone with superstar potential or star potential. That's not what you're getting in Nique Clifford. What you're getting in Nique Clifford is someone who's going to come in and make an impact right away and just be a smart player who can do a little bit of everything. That's the big thing for him, just being able to contribute in so many different ways. At 6'6", he averaged 9.6 rebounds per game, which is wild. Using that length and athleticism to be able to contribute on the boards. He averaged 18 points per game at Colorado State, shot 37.7% from three, and he scored those 18 points per game in multiple different ways. He's able to catch and shoot from threes, also able to make things happen off the bounce. And so he's kind of like that guard slash wing at 6'6", which again is why I say he's not that like jumbo defensive wing forward that the Kings kind of still need, but the Kings also need someone who's 6'6" with a 6'8" wingspan who can rebound like that and defend, a solid defender, a solid shooter, a solid rebounder, a solid passer. Like everything about this dude is just solid. I think another thing that you can look at with him is he has that kind of dog mentality, and that he fits the identity that Scott Perry wants to implement. And so that, that checks the box for Scott Perry's kind of, one of his first moves as general manager of the Kings. And, you know, the funny thing is, like, if he hadn't traded into this first round, it's not like it would have been the biggest deal. Like, the Kings didn't need to trade for the 24th pick, but it's just so nice that they did, because if they didn't, you know, when we'd been hearing so many rumors about the Kings trading into this draft, if we would have been let down you know, the first opportunity for Scott Perry to do something, if we would have been let down, I mean, that would have sucked, because you know, it's not like Scott Perry needed to do this move. It's not like he needed to trade into this draft, but we're just coming from a front office with Monty McNair and company that constantly it was like, maybe they're going to do something, maybe they're going to do something, and then it never got done. It's like, oh, they'll do something next offseason, next trade deadline, next draft, they'll get a wing at the next opportunity, and they just never did. And so, again, like, this isn't the biggest thing of all time, but it's just so nice that at Scott Perry's first opportunity, he went out, actually got the move done, and was actually able to obtain that wing that does fit this team. I don't think this move necessarily tells us exactly what direction Scott Perry is taking this team yet, because Nique Clifford is the type of player that can fit in so many different places. And so because of that, it's like we don't necessarily know who's going to be traded. We thought coming in, maybe there could be like a DeMar DeRozan trade with the Miami Heat coming into this draft or something like that for pick number 20. That didn't end up happening. Instead, it was just that future draft capital, because OKC just doesn't need another player because they just have too many good players. They're like, yeah, Nique Clifford's nice, but like we just have too many players. And so we still have a lot to be done. And the reporting after the Kings made this pick was that it looks likely that Malik Monk uh, is going to be moved, which, you know, makes sense, just because it already made sense that Malik Monk could be the odd man out of all of the guards that the Kings have, but also because you bring in Nique Clifford, and again, he is a wing, but that's more of those minutes as a guy that's 6'6", who can play the 3. No, of course, Malik Monk isn't playing the 3, but, you know, it's all a domino effect in terms of the minutes there. And so you're looking at it, if you want to get a guy like Nique Clifford minutes, then you're looking at, you know, moving Zach LaVine to the 2 when maybe he would have been playing the 3, and then that moves, you know, someone else, and then it just goes from there. And so that's probably why that reporting about Malik Monk being on his way out happened right after this pick, if I were to guess. There was a part of me that was hoping that the Kings were just going to take some 18-year-old super athlete that we could convince ourselves was going to be the next Giannis Antetokounmpo or something like that. That's definitely not what we're getting, but I feel like maybe we can convince ourselves that Clifford is going to be the next Keegan Murray, or just a very solid role player that, like I said, no matter which direction you take this team, hopefully he can be a solid contributor. I would say, like last season in the draft, I was a big fan of Tristan da Silva, who ended up going to the Magic. I think he went to Colorado, right? So it's like Colorado. Nique Clifford's out of Colorado State. I'm just a fan of these guys that come in that are wings, that have solid size, that are just good at everything, can do a little bit of everything. And so for one night at least, I think I can go to bed happy and with a little more confidence in this Kings front office, this new Kings front office that was able to make a move, that was able to get it done, and that was able to get their guy. Because there were a ton of people that had Nique Clifford super high on their draft boards, you know, up near the 10th best player or so. And I talked about him when I was previewing the draft for the Kings. I think he was the first wing that I talked about, because I was absolutely a fan of him coming into this draft. And so it's just nice to have a draft where you're not scratching your head going, what are we doing? Because that's a bit how I was with Devin Carter, even though I talked myself into it. That's absolutely how I was with Davion Mitchell. to bit how I was when the Kings traded the first round pick with Rashawn Holmes in a salary dump, even though again I can talk myself into all of these, but it's the first time where I don't have to talk myself into one. This was a guy who I already liked coming in as a fit for the Kings. But yeah, I'm super excited to see what Clifford's going to do in summer league. But talking about some other reports that came out recently, we had a report that the Kings were the front runners to sign Dennis Schroeder in free agency, which is interesting. He's not a guy that I really had on my radar, but he actually does fit with the type of point guards that I have been looking at, like a Tyus Jones or a Malcolm Brogdon or a Trey Jones, those type of point guards who are better as backups and who as starters are low end starters, but are very much stopgap solutions. And the Kings don't have a point guard that they're like waiting for to take the mantle. And so it's like a stopgap for what, I guess. But I do like Dennis Schroeder as a player. Like he's a solid playmaker, a solid scorer, a solid defender. I feel like that's the theme right now. It's just guys who are solid at a lot of things, and that's Dennis Schroeder. He's not the greatest 3-point shooter, and so I can understand the Kings going after him, and I like him as a player. Again, when you're talking about him as your point guard, if you're trying to like really make a run at the playoffs or something like that, or be really competitive, he may not be the best option. You want him as a backup, but the Kings just need someone who is a point guard, and so if you can get him in for agency, I'm definitely not mad at that. And again, we don't totally know the direction of the Kings. We don't totally know which direction Scott Perry wants to take this team. And so if we do bring in Dennis Schroeder as just a guy to play point guard while we try to figure it out, and while maybe we're looking to trade Monk and DeMar and Sabonis and Levine. Like we could look to trade any of them, and I've said this before. I feel like it's kind of this next season is kind of a transition season, a season where we're just trying to figure out what we're doing with this roster. And so you bring in Dennis Schroeder for that type of season, maybe on a 1-2 year deal to just be your point guard as you try to just figure it out. Because where the Kings are at right now, as this draft was going on and as I was getting worried that maybe the Kings weren't going to trade into this draft, I was just thinking about how it isn't necessary that the Kings make all their moves this offseason if they're going to rebuild, right? If the Kings are headed towards pretty much a rebuild and getting rid of a lot of their top players, it's not like you necessarily need to get rid of them this offseason. It would be nice to like pick a direction and get rid of some of them so that you can then, you know, get towards a better pick, let's be honest. But I think one of the reasons why it's a transition season is because after this season, Levine will be on an expiring, DeRozan will be on an expiring deal, makes them easier to move. Sabonis will only have 2 seasons left. And so I think that gives the Kings a lot more flexibility. So it'll be very interesting to see what this offseason holds, and it will probably all happen very soon, within a week or two, or at least within this month. Obviously, we got the second round of the draft tomorrow, and the Kings have that 42nd overall pick, which now I'm a lot more excited about because there's not this pressure of them having to be our best rookie, right? If we do end up making that pick, second round picks get moved all the time. So you never know what's going to happen with that. I'm not holding my breath that the Kings are actually going to be selecting at 42 just because craziness happens in the second round. Everything gets traded. But now that the Kings have their first round guy, it's nicer than to be able to have just a secondary guy who you're hoping can be something, but there's not that pressure to be like the number one rookie on your team. But I think I'd just say that this one move that Scott Perry and this front office has just made me more excited about this offseason because it showed, hey, they can actually make a move. And when there's a rumor that they are going to move into the draft, especially if there's someone they like that falls to them, which obviously that's what happened with Nique Clifford, then they actually can pull the trigger and make that move. And so hopefully that's what we're going to see in this offseason, and that there are moves and that there are plenty of changes in the right direction, whatever that may be. Hopefully, just balancing out this roster, and if we pick to rebuild, then hopefully getting some solid young pieces or some just draft capital for our top guys. And if not, obviously I think that the Kings should be going the rebuild route, but if not, then just balance out this roster and give us a chance to at least be excited to watch this team next season, even if, the expectations aren't going to be super high. There were some other interesting things though that happened in this draft. But the team that I was really looking at was the Brooklyn Nets because they had 5 first round picks and 4 of them were like in a 9 pick span, which is crazy. And so I was just looking at them as like maybe a trade partner for the Kings. Obviously, like, are they going to make all 5 picks? And well, I believe they did end up making all 5 picks. I don't think they traded any of them. And I they honestly had the funniest draft to me because I mean, I'm not a fan of what they did necessarily, but they got 3 of these guards that can't shoot and just are good passers. It's so funny to me in Jaeger Demon and Nolan Traore and Ben Seraph. I feel for Nets fans who probably were super excited about making 5 picks, and then they just got like 5 of the most boring guys possible, to be honest. I mean, I like Nolan Traore, but like the guys that just like don't fit together, and there aren't many of them that I like see that star upside, and so yeah, it was a funny draft for them. Some other things that happened, Ace Bailey going at 5 to the Jazz when he clearly did not want to go to the Jazz. Shout out to the Jazz for that one. Just pick the dude. If you think he's the best player available, just pick him. I was super confused at what the Pelicans were doing. They got Jeremiah Fears, and I like Jeremiah Fears, but it's just kind of interesting because they traded for Jordan Poole, which, maybe isn't the biggest deal, but that's kind of a funny backcourt. But the main thing for New Orleans was when they traded for Derek Queen at number 13, and they traded, I believe it was the 23rd pick. Yeah, it was the 23rd pick plus a pick next year. That's a best swap between themselves and Milwaukee. And so, like, Milwaukee will probably be good, but there's a chance that they could be bad. So that pick could be good. But then just New Orleans themselves, like, New Orleans, do you guys think you're going to be good? Like, why would you give up that unprotected best swap of a pick next season to the Hawks? And that Hawks pick was the Kings pick. So I wish it was the Kings that could have done that deal if they had that 13th overall pick. That was a head scratcher from New Orleans. And it's always nice to have other teams making the head scratching moves. Joe Dumars in that New Orleans front office with an odd one there. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. Very happy with what the Kings did. By no means am I trying to, make it out like the Kings got the next superstar of the NBA in Nique Clifford, but I'm just super happy they got a well-rounded player who's going to come in and who's, most likely going to contribute right away and be a real positive for this team at a position of need on the wing as a guy who can defend and knock down from 3 and do other things well as well. And so I'm excited for tomorrow to see what the Kings do in the second round. As I'm sure you've noticed, I am on a different setup here. I'm on vacation. I was thinking of doing the podcast from the hot tub. That would have been funny, but no, I'm here with a very scuffed setup. But I had to react nonetheless because the Kings traded into the first round. So that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. If enough happens tomorrow, then I'll make a full episode tomorrow. If not, probably just a short. So be on the lookout for both the short and the full episode if it happens tomorrow. So I will see you guys then. Peace.